Hello and welcome back, everybody, to TBC Central. My name is Nancy and I am your host. Yesterday, we went over a video and we learned a little bit about fractional reserve banking. So let's review that a little bit before we go on to video 3. How fractional reserve banking works. Fractional reserve banking is a banking system in which banks only hold a fraction of the money that their customer deposits as a reserve. This allows them to use the rest of it to make loans, thereby essentially creating new money. This gives commercial banks the power to directly affect the money supply. In fact, even though central banks are in charge of controlling money supply, most of the money in modern economies is created by commercial banks through fractional reserve banking. To understand how this exactly works, we look at the process in more detail. 100% reserve banking. To explain the idea behind fractional reserve banking, we first have to consider its opposite, which is 100% reserve banking. In this system, banks are required to hold all deposits as reserves. To give an example, let's assume we have an economy with a money supply of 100 million US dollars. In this economy, the first bank ever just opened, we'll call it Super Safe Bank. This bank is only a depository institution. That means it accepts deposits, but it does not give out any loans. By keeping all deposits in its vault, as reserves, the bank provides its customers with a safe place to keep their money, nothing more and nothing less. Depositors can return anytime and withdraw their deposits. Even if all of them do this at the same time, there's no shortage of cash because all their money is stored in the same bank's vault. In other words, all the bank's liabilities, meaning deposits, are covered by the reserves, which are the assets. We can illustrate this by creating a T account for a super safe bank. And that's what that bank would look like, where we would have reserves at 100% and deposits or liabilities in 100%. So, it's equal, it's balanced. What you see is what you have in there. Now, let's look at the money supply in this example. Before Super Safe Bank opened, people had to hold all USD 100 million in cash. Now they can deposit all their money in the bank. Every deposit they make reduces the currency in circulation and increases demand deposits by the exact same amount. As a consequence, money supply, which also includes demand deposits, remains unchanged. Thus, in the case of 100% reserve banking, banks cannot control or influence the money supply. Fractional reserve banking. For the sake of the example, let's assume that the Super Safe Bank has USD $100 million in its vault. Most of this money is just sitting there idle. Of course, there must always be some reserves for customers who want to make a withdrawal. However, the flow of withdrawals is roughly the same as the flow of new deposits. It's not necessary for the bank to keep all deposits as reserves. Instead, it can use some of their money to make loans to people who need money, meaning if they want to buy a house, a new car, or go to a university. This is what we call fractional reserve banking. In most countries, the fractional of total deposits the banks need to keep as reserves, i.e. the reserve ratio, is regulated by the government and/or bank policies. Let's assume that Super Safe Bank is required to keep 10% of all deposits, i.e. 10 million US dollars, as reserves. That's in the example that we're using. It can use the remaining 90% or 90 million US dollars to make loans with. Of course, the bank can also decide to keep the reserves above legal requirements, meaning excess reserves, to make sure they don't run out of cash. After all, an unexpected high number of withdrawals in a short amount of time, meaning a bank run, could put banks in serious trouble. This becomes clear once we look at our T account again. As you can see, the assets and liabilities are still balanced, but now the loans make up the assets. So you can see here, the assets have reserves of 10 and loans of 90. And then the liabilities is all the deposits in the bank. So it's not as balanced as the last time. I mean, it's balanced, but you don't have 100% on each side. You have loans that the bank has to collect on, plus reserves. When it comes to money supply, fractional reserve banking is a game changer. As long as the super safe bank does not give out any loans, total money reserve supply remains at $100 million USD. As soon as the bank starts making loans, however, the money supply increases. In this case, depositors still have their demand deposits totaling 100 million USD, but borrowers now also hold an additional 90 million USD in cash. Thus, the total money supply now equals to 190 million USD. Note that this process can be repeated, which further increases more money supply. But if you look at that, you'll see that the bank never made more money. It loaned out the same money again and again and again. So here's a disclaimer: money versus wealth. At first glance, the fractional reserve banking system probably seems too good to be true. How can it be possible for banks to create money out of thin air? At this point, it's important to note they create money, not wealth. Money in this context is only a medium of exchange. It has no intrinsic value. By taking a loan, borrowers get more money, but at the same time, they are taking on more debt. So at the end of the day, they are not richer than before. In other words, an increase of money supply only results in a higher level of liquidity, meaning it does not make the economy wealthier at all. In a nutshell, fractional reserve banking is a banking system in which banks only hold a fraction of the money their customer deposits as reserves. This allows them to make loans to people who want to borrow money to buy a house, a new car, or go to university. This process essentially creates money and thus increases the money supply. It is important to note, however, that even though new money is created, the overall wealth in the economy remains unchanged. So let's go ahead and get to the other video, part 3. We'll go through that.
We now know that for centuries, the people of the United States have been at war with the international banking oligarchs. That war was lost, completely for good, in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. With the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, President Woodrow Wilson consigned the American population to a century in which the money supply itself has depended on the whims of the banking cabal. A century of booms and busts, bubbles and depressions, has led to a wholesale redistribution of wealth toward those at the very top of the system. At the bottom, the masses toil in relative poverty, single-income households becoming double-income households out of necessity, their quality of life being slowly eroded as the Federal Reserve notes that pass for dollars are themselves devalued. Worse yet, the fraud itself perpetuates Alexander Hamilton's persistent myth that the national debt is necessary at all. The U.S. is now locked into a system whereby the government issues bonds to generate the funds for their operations, bonds that are backed up by the taxation of the public's own labor. Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. This is why the bankers and their partners in government and business conspired to bring about the 2008 crisis, not for the pursuit of money, but power. In the same way the bankers used the panic of 1907 to consolidate their control over the money supply, they hope to use the 2008 crisis and subsequent panics, which they themselves have created, to consolidate their political control.
The International Summit for the Global Financial Crisis has been expanded from G7 to G20 because the leading 7 developed countries cannot solve the crisis alone. This expanded meeting raises the question whether a new global financial system will be created.
So is this some sort of new world order, which Gordon Brown kind of alluded to?
British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has described the quote-unquote guiding principles to be addressed at the summit. They are transparency, sound banking, responsibility, integrity, and get this, global governance, unquote. I think the new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.
The inevitable conclusion, one that flows necessarily from the true understanding of this situation, is that the Federal Reserve System needs to be consigned to the dustbin of history. After a century of enslavement, it is time for the American public to finally throw off the bankers' debt chains.
If there was ever a point in human history to start questioning alternatives, this would be it. And to think that where we are and simply say, oh, well, this is the best of our options. How many of the best options lead to self-destruction? Doesn't sound like a best option. I think that with a world of 7 billion people, we can probably come up with something better than a system in which a few thousand people benefit so much at the expense of everything else on this world, and at the expense of the potential for the future of mankind. They're leveraging our future. And so long as we accept this way of thinking, so long as we accept these institutions as having dominance, that's the direction we'll be going. So I think reform is a good way to try and stall and to push back directly against the expanding and evolving power structures. But radical change is what's really needed, and that has to be built from the bottom up. But I think that these two processes can and should go together in parallel.
If you've made it this far, congratulations. You are now better informed on the economic history of the United States and the truth about the Federal Reserve than 99% of the population. If you do nothing else, then just working to get those around you educated on this information alone will have a profound effect. Once they learn of the scam, many are motivated to do something about it, and they, in turn, inform others. This is the viral nature of suppressed truth, and it is the reason that more people are aware of and energized by the issue of the Federal Reserve and the nature of money than ever before. Perhaps even more amazingly, this movement is spreading to other parts of the globe. Recognizing the interlocking nature of the modern global economy and the international nature of the banking oligarchy, movements to abolish the Federal Reserve have sprung up in Europe, where protests against the cartelized central banking system are taking place in over 100 cities, attracting 20,000 people on a weekly basis.
I started this movement because I realized that the Federal Reserve Act, in my opinion, is one of the most worst laws in the whole world. So a private banking company is lending America the money, and in my opinion, America is not any more democratic. The Federal Reserve tells the government what to do, and that's a problem.
It's a very big problem, especially in the U.S. Why is it a global issue, and why are people doing it here in Germany?
Because when you realize that this finance system, it's a global system, you have to go to the really beginning of the system. And in my opinion, it's also the World Bank and the International Fund of Currencies and stuff like this. But at the beginning of all this is a law from 1913. Woodrow Wilson signed it. And this is the beginning of all this hardcore capitalism we are suffering right now from. And the only way to stop this is maybe to break this law.
So a state bank with the partnering with the local banks can provide the capital, can help them with capital. In North Dakota, the state bank guarantees the loans of the local banks, allowing them to make much bigger loans than they could otherwise. And the state bank provides liquidity to the small banks. That's why the small banks, the local banks, aren't making loans to small business right now, because they don't know that they can get money from the other banks as needed. The way banking works is they make the loan first. I mean, if you have credit lines to many different businesses, and if they all hit up their credit lines at once, you're going to run out of money. So you don't dare do that unless you know that you can get short-term loans from the other banks. And what's happening right now, even though there's 1.6 trillion in excess reserves sitting on the books of the big banks, they're not available to the little banks. And the reason is because the Fed is paying 0.25% interest on those reserves. So the banks have no incentive to lend them to the little banks. Why let go of them when you can make just as much keeping them, and then you still have your reserves, and you can use them as collateral to buy bonds or something that'll make you more money. So the whole system is messed up. And in North Dakota,
server, there's no controlling company, there's no office. It's just free software that anyone can download and start running on their computer anywhere in the world. And that the bitcoins themselves can be transferred to or from anyone anywhere in the world. And it's impossible for any bank or government or entity to block you from sending or receiving those bitcoins. There's a limited supply of those bitcoins. There will never, ever, ever be more than 21 million bitcoins. And so, because like everything, the price is set based on supply and demand. Because the supply of bitcoins is limited and the demand is increasing as more and more people start to use them and more websites start to accept them, the price of bitcoins in terms of dollars is going to have to increase even a lot more than the $500 per bitcoin that it is today.
Are there any drawbacks at all to the idea of using cryptocurrency?
If you're part of the current power elite that can just print money at will to spend on whatever you feel like, then switching to bitcoin is probably not going to benefit you. But if you're one of the normal people that are working for the Federal Reserve or any central bank that's printing money to pay to your friends and that sort of thing, the bitcoin world is a wonderful thing to do.
Sound money, cryptocurrencies, state banks, LETS programs, self-issued credit. These and many other solutions have all been proposed, and many of them are in use in different localities today. Information on all of these ideas and how they are being applied in various parts of the world are widely available online. The point is that the question of what money is and how it should be created is perhaps the single greatest question facing humanity as a whole, and yet it is one that has been almost completely eliminated from the national conversation. Until recently. And so the rest of the story is now in our hands. Once we understand the scam that has taken place, the gradual consolidation of wealth and power in the hands of an elite few banking oligarchs, and the growing impoverishment of the masses, all in the name of banking funny money created out of nothing and belonging to the public in interest, we can choose to get active, or to do nothing at all. For those who choose to get active, there are some steps that you can take to help change the course of the system. First, follow the links and resources for the transcript of this documentary at report.com/Federal Reserve to familiarize yourself with the history, the connections, and the functions of the Federal Reserve System. If you can't explain this material to yourself, then you will never be able to teach it to others. Secondly, begin reaching out to others to bring them up to speed on the issue. It can be as simple as broaching this conversation in the Monday morning water cooler talk, or passing out a copy of this documentary, or sending out links to this information to your email list. Insert this topic into your conversations. When people start talking about the national debt, or the state of the economy, or other political talking points, get them to question the roots of these issues, and why there is a national debt at all. Thirdly, when you are able to find or create a group of like-minded people in your area who are engaged with the issue, start a study group on the issue and its solutions. The study group can help source alternative or complementary currencies in the local area, or if none exist already, the group can form the basis for a community of local businesses and customers who are willing to start experimenting with ways to wean themselves off of the Federal Reserve notes. Fourthly, use the resources at corporatereport.com, including the Federal Reserve information flyer, or DVD screenings, to attract interest in your group and draw others into studying the true nature of the monetary system. The work of building up an alternative to the current system can seem daunting, even at times overwhelming, but it is important to keep in mind that the Federal Reserve System that seems so monolithic today has only been around for 1 century. Central banks have been defeated in America before, and they can be defeated again. The question of how we decide to change this system is not rhetorical. It will either be answered by an informed, engaged, active population working together to create viable alternatives and to dismantle the current system, or it will be answered by the same banking oligarchy that has been controlling the money supply, and indeed the lifeblood of the country, for generations. conditions. Now, 1 century after the creation of the Federal Reserve System, we have a choice to make. Whether the next century, like the one before it, will be a century of enslavement, or transformed by the actions and choices that we make in the light of this knowledge, a century of empowerment.
All right, that's the end of the 3rd video, and that's the last of the series, because that was 3 videos in this series. I thank you for joining me all today, and I'm sorry about the person who has decided to cut bushes and shrubs outside the window here. So anyway, I will catch you on the next video. Y'all have a blessed day. Bye-bye.